by several people involved with the funding of the project and then what the actual budgeted or bid construction costs are. And you can see for the Expo Center, I have it marked in red with a box around it, $469,210. And so when the Arts Commission was looking at all of the MAPS art projects, it was when we were undertaking a public art master plan for the city. So they wanted to evaluate them and get them all started off on the right track. So we had a committee of arts commissioners at the time. Jim Loftus was the chair. Liz Eichmann, who is our new chair, was also on the committee. Jim Hassenbeck, who had been highly involved in the original MAPS projects. And then Steve Hill in the mayor's office, his chief of staff, who is also an arts commissioner, worked with me to evaluate each one of the MAPS projects and come up with preliminary recommendations.
Robbie, I'm going to interrupt you for just a moment.
Sure.
We now have a quorum, so I'm going to call the meeting to order, if we may. That's item 1 on your agenda. The meeting is hereby called to order. You've been furnished with copies of the minutes of the previous meeting. Are there additions or corrections? Been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The minutes are approved. Now, Robbie, please continue with item 4 on the agenda.
Great.
Thank you.
Glad you have a quorum. So here are the recommendations from the Arts Commission. The committee made the recommendations, presented them to the full Arts Commission, and then they were received and recommended. So in looking at the $469,000, the Arts Commission recommended using a portion of it to undertake a public art master plan for the Fairgrounds campus. And you can see there they identified some significant scope for that master plan, also obtaining cost estimates. We knew that there were several existing art pieces that had never been added to the city's collection or even considered. So evaluating each of those, some are having some maintenance issues, so going back and looking at those. And then using the remainder of the 1% funds after the master plan was completed to commission some significant exterior work. So at this point, we were very lucky. We originally thought that we would need to hire a master plan consultant, but we actually have an urban designer and planner on the planning staff that I'll introduce next, who was able to work with me and complete a master plan, and that's why we have these recommendations. So we did not have to tap into the 1% for art funds to do that. So I'm going to introduce Aryan Yeager with the planning department. He's an urban designer in planning, and he's going to walk you through his findings, and then we'll go back to the recommendation.
Thank you.
Hello. Well, this is sort of the summary of what is important for art and experiencing of art, the combination of a building, public space, and an art piece. And on the next slide, you can see that a large art piece often needs to have large space around it. Large buildings, it works best if it's connected to buildings and public space. The next one, closer to home, is also a good example of how an art piece is better experienced when it's sort of doing something extra. So this is almost like an extra part of the skyline of Oklahoma City. Next one is a leadership square, also a good example of like a big art piece that needs some space, that needs a big building. And it functions better than there would be a smaller building or a smaller art piece or a confusing public space around. And all this was important for us to also explain that the State Fair Park also needs something like that to consider, like where you place art matters, considering what the buildings are, where the public space is working, and how people move around. One of the things we also wanted to mention is that buildings can also be an art piece. There are like the Space Needle, the Arch, that are great objects that are you see them from all over the city. You can also consider them as interesting objects on the area. And this is an example we quickly made. This is the existing surrounding of the arch. And on the next slide, you can see how investments in public space could also make the arch a more interesting place to be around. And if you do something with the arch itself, it becomes more a special place to be. What is also important is that during the State Fair, when it's going on, all the lights and all the excitement and all the entertainment is almost like an art by itself. All the lights, I mean, you can see it sort of in the picture. It's interesting how light art can also be a part of the State Fair Park, because it's such an attractive place to be during the State Fair especially. We ran through the site quickly with an analysis. So this is the site. And the next slide. You can see how there are different sizes of buildings that are all with a different orientation. So you have an expo, medium-sized area where sort of the older buildings are surrounded around, rounding up around the Space Needle. The stalls, the arena, and the expo, the new expo building, are extra large buildings. They have a different size, a different public space around it. And on the east side, you have the administration building and the park. And all those are kind of connected by the yellow lines. It's almost like a meter system, but if there is an event or more events going on in the State Fair Park, people will walk along the orange or the yellow lines. So that's also a way how people will approach the area and how they will move around and experience possible art. So by that, we use that to have art site suggestions. And here you see in the blue dots, blue-white dots, where the existing art is, mostly located around the Space Needle. And the two on the far east side are marks. There could be great places for entrances for gateway signs, for gateway elements, for consideration. The next one is you can use existing open spaces like the Central Park, the Triangular Park, as a location to place art because it's sort of an underused public space right now. But there are also interesting walk paths for where people are walking. So there are vistas created, and on the end of those vistas you can also place art if you consider the size and how the movement is of people. And this is also an interesting one. You have also light art and use the great buildings that are already on the site. And the Space Needle is, of course, a very prominent building, but also the Expo building, the new Expo building, is an interesting location to do light art. And the arena is also visible from the interstate if you use the interstate. So it's interesting to think about using the buildings as projection screens almost to do something special on the site. So altogether we came up with suggested art sites that have different impact on the site, different meaning. And by that we talked with State Fair, with each other, with other people in the planning department about which site would be the best to suggest the first art to go to, the funding to go to. Robbie will introduce more.
So in all, this meeting is to present these findings to you and get some feedback so that we can finalize the art plan and take it back to the Arts Commission for their final recommendation. And with all that we've learned along the way, we feel that, especially from the light art slide that Ariane showed you, that focused on the Space Needle and the Expo Center and the arena as being significant sites, the highest priority for recommending the 1% for art was to recontextualize the popular relic that most of the community associates with the fairgrounds, and that is the Space Needle. We would use a small portion of the funds to stabilize the clanking cables and the cab. And then we would do a call to artists that would be a fairly large team to look at it as an art piece where they would change it in some way and also add light. From the feedback that we've received so far from all the various committees we presented to, we would also include in that scope of work something related to the Expo Center and possibly to the arena as an ad alternate, because we do think that there might be some available funds outside of the 1% in the future, and at least we would know about that, and then if they weren't there, we could save that for a future 1% for art project. Because that's why it's important to have a master plan, so that you have a plan to use even existing 1% for art money, but also future money. And then also future donations of art funds could be directed to those things. And so one of the other things that is recommended is these pieces of public art, and we're going to add the arch to this for evaluation. We would use a small amount of the funding to evaluate each one of those for future maintenance and repair costs. Each one of these would also be brought back to the Arts Commission because they haven't been brought through a recommendation process. Right now, they're not in ownership of the city, and they haven't been brought to the city as a donation. They're still, we think, be owned by the fairgrounds, the private board that is the operator of the site. And there's two, if they're not recommended to be donated to the city, then they would be under a revocable permit. And we'll go back in and, clean up the records on those. And so when we do have the art project, this is the recommendation for the selection committee, and that we would have a professional art juror, we would have State Fair board and director involved, the arts commissioner that's been designated as Stephen Kovash. If there's an active member of a design team working on a project at the fairgrounds, that is also a possibility. Bob Nealon or his designee, being the subcommittee for the Expo Center, would also designate someone. And then the contract manager for the city with the service provider, the operator at the fairgrounds, Tom Anderson, would be involved. Because one of the things that happens is when a public art piece is commissioned and installed, the operator then becomes designated to help maintain it, and it becomes part of their annual contract. So with that, we would love any feedback you might have or any questions. We'd love to answer them.
Robbie, the Space Needle, does it still operate as far as the cabinet?
No.
Or do you plan to restore that?
No, Tim O'Toole said they have received, it's very rare in its makeup. A German company originally planned it. I learned this week it was one of the largest concrete projects in Oklahoma history at its time, too, the base for it. It hasn't been working for years, and it's such a high cost to make it operational that would not be something that the operator would ever elect to do. And so that's part of the thinking here. It would be pretty costly to take it away. And so while it has kind of, you can see from the master plan evaluation that it's kind of the center of everything, and because of its height and its beauty and kind of its memory to the community, it became an obvious one to recommend for some kind of recontextualizing and making it, again, an asset to the fairgrounds. So
The work you have planned is around the base of it. It looked like benches.
and including the Space Needle, too. When we do this call to artists, this would be a team. It would be a design team. It could have a visual, public art artist. I would imagine it would have architects and engineers on the team. This is a large amount of money. And then it would also have lighting designers on the team. So we would expect some things maybe even being added to it in addition to the lighting, certainly some kind of paint or finish. And I hesitate to say too much because I don't want you to leave this presentation thinking it's going to be this and then it turns out that. So usually when we describe what we're looking for in a team that could carry out the project, we try to keep it loose enough so that it can exceed our expectations with the art.
Other questions or comments? Bob?
I'll just add to what Robbie had said. We had a very lively discussion at our subcommittee meeting on Tuesday. A couple of observations from that. I was confused, and I think perhaps other members of the committee were confused as to who owned the property where the fairgrounds is located. I guess I had been operating under the assumption that it was the fairgrounds and the fairgrounds board, but it is actually city property. So when we're talking about the 1%, we can utilize all of the fairgrounds property for application of that 1%, as opposed to just the Bennett Expo Center that we just constructed. So we have that flexibility, and as Robbie mentioned, there are pieces of art not yet city-owned, but need to go through a process to become city-owned that could be repositioned, repurposed around the fairgrounds, as well as adding whatever we choose to do with the 1% funds that we have off the MAPS construction budget for the Bennett Center. I think there was some pushback against the initial recommendation of spending most of the funds, $450,000, just focused on the needle. And so I think the committee that looks at this is going to look at how much of those funds ought to be spent on reconceptualizing the needle, putting in other art perhaps at the Expo Center. But those are all issues on the table, and nothing's been decided as to what will be done, where it will be placed, what size it will be, what it will look like. those are all decisions on down the line. But we have the flexibility to do whatever we want to with that 1% on the fairgrounds property, whether that is focused on the Needle, focused on the Bennett Center, spread around through the various places that Ariane indicated would be good places for art. We have a lot of flexibility, and I think the team that will be working with Robbie is going to be well positioned to make good decisions about how to use that 1%.
Robbie, a question I had, both you and Bob described that there are works of art there that don't belong to the city that you're going to could be repositioned, and there has to be some process to get them in the possession of the city to use them. Are those the ones that are shown in your presentation? These
Yes.
statues and things.
Yes,
Those are
and
the
we would
ones.
also add the arch to that in our final analysis.
But these things are all already there.
They
But
are.
they don't belong to the city, and so this process is going to
That's
bring all
right.
that into the master
Yeah,
plan.
it's like an opportunity for housekeeping of major proportions to get all of it in order, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sue?
I wanted to make a comment about the idea of light and maybe technology, and I love that idea. And also maybe fluidity of where it might not always look the same, but not necessarily like the Skydance or Devon. So I really encourage that thinking and a little outside of the box so it continues to grow.
One of
as
our
we do.
hopes would also be like something kinetic that could help achieve that. So that will be one of the things, that we will, when we describe it in the call to artists, we can throw out a couple of things that might be possible just to help stimulate, the artists that might respond, that this would be a direction we would go. But we certainly thought of kinetic because that combined with the light could be really fascinating and different.
I also am very happy to see the pursuing of some of these existing statues. I just think that's part of our city. It's part of our story, and I encourage that.
Any other comments, questions for Robbie? Well, Robbie, thank you. I hope you'll carry forward the comments you received here. We'll be glad to hear from you again as the process goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it. All right, then, that brings us back to item 3. I want to mention in this regard, we have a presentation at item 18 where we're going to talk in more detail about where we are from a financial standpoint from both collections and expenditures. But you do have before you the MAPS 3 revenue and expenditure report for the period ending March 31st. David, any comments?
Yes, sir. I'll go over that just real briefly. On the revenue side, for the period ending March 31st, 2017, for the month, $8,275,788. Fiscal year of $81,169,803, and total program revenue of $719,961,765. On the expenditure side for the month, $12,907,470. Fiscal year, $60,375,434, and total program expenditures to March 31st of $266,572,732. Then you also have your budget and obligations report in your packet, and I can answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for David about the expenditure report? Well, I want to make just this one brief comment. I was reminded yesterday that today marks April meeting, marks the 7th anniversary. We began this process together April 2010. And so today, we have now spent $266 million, and we're well on our way to the completion of all of the projects with which we've been given the responsibility of oversight. And I just want to thank each one of you for the volunteer time and effort that you've devoted to this. And we're making great progress 7 years in. So thank you all. All right, shall we receive the report? Been moved and seconded that we receive the revenue and expenditure report. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The report is received. David, that takes us to item number 5, a resolution recommended.
Yes, sir. This is recommend resolution approving change order number 25, MAPS 3, Oklahoma State Fairgrounds, Phase 2, new expo building, increase of $102,438.11, project M3-F002. There's 3 large items on this. The first one is a state fair request for compressor phase monitoring relay, and this allows the compressors for the coolers to stay in phase and run at the same time so that they aren't competing and causing issues with electricity. Then item 3 is a floor box receptacle modification. The boxes were built as spec, but the fairgrounds determined that it would be better if the receptacles were reversed, easier to plug in the distribution boxes that go down into the floor boxes. And then also there are some pipes that extend into those boxes, and if we were to trim the edges or the ends off of those pipes beyond the nut that holds it into the box, it gives it more room to put the distribution boxes in there. So that was something that the State Fair also requested. And then there's a high voltage circuit revision. This is the voltage that's outside in the secondary loop for power for the building. It has to do with the switch that was in there. This comes with a recommendation from the subcommittee.
All right, thank you. Bob, any comments from the subcommittee?
Just these are tweaks that are being made to the Expo Center now that it's under operation. We're actually experiencing things, making the changes, not inexpensive, but necessary to do. It does come with a recommendation. The committee, I'll move approval.
Is there been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution? Is there further discussion or questions? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The resolution is accepted. That moves us to item, let's see, that's 6, isn't it, Dave?
Yes, sir. Item 6 is recommend resolution accepting the MAPS 3 Oklahoma State Fairgrounds new expo building signage project and placing the maintenance bond into effect, project M3-F002C. This is the signage project that was bid independently of the expo building. It is the signage that is on the exterior. It's not the concession signage. We also have a contract on that, and it's still ongoing. But this is the exterior signage. Pleased with how that was completed, and this also comes with a recommendation from the subcommittee.
Questions of David? Been moved and seconded that we approve this. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The resolution is approved. David, item 7.
Item 7 is recommend resolution approving change order number 13, MAPS 3, Senior Health and Wellness Center number 1, increase of $131,655, project M3-H002. This is part of what we talked about last month, and that is some additional things at the Wellness Center that the operator wanted and that needed to be done. So the main item on this is item 3, and that's the gymnasium wall enhancements. The architect has gone through and designed the enhancements that the operator wanted to make the room look nicer. This comes with the recommendation from those that were present at the subcommittee with the Wellness Center. They did not have a quorum yesterday. Then item 4 is some additional receptacles that the operator wanted, some shower revisions, the window coverings that were mentioned previously in the discussion last month for additional funding.
All right, then. Michael and Cecilia, I want to give you guys a chance as we think about this resolution to give us some good news that you guys heard from the operator yesterday. I thought that was a wonderful kind of an update. Either one, Cecilia, you want to do that for us?
Yes, actually, it was a wonderful update. I think there was an article in the paper yesterday also that highlighted that the opening has exceeded their expectations in regards to enrollment. And so I think they planned on about 600, and they are at 1,800 registered users. And so it's going well. They reported the classes that they are offering. They're filling up quickly. They're having waiting lists. They're having to add more instructors. And so it is going much better than expected, and who knew that, belly dancing for seniors was so popular. So it's been great. But he said that's one of the classes that fills up quickly. That's not me. That's what he shared. And so it's going very, very well.
Thank you, Cecilia. Anything you want to add, Mike? All right, shall we approve this? Been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is approved. Item 8.
Item 8 is recommend joint resolution ratifying and approving addenda numbers 1 and 2, MAPS 3, Senior Health and Wellness Center number 2, West Parking Lot, awarding contract total bid plus unit prices to Connolly Paving Company in the amount of $523,880, approving contract and bonds, and authorizing use of Oklahoma City Capital Improvement Sales Tax contingency funds for the construction of the project M3-H003B. This is the parking lot that is in addition to what is being put in with the Senior Center number 2. We talked about it at the preliminary report stage, and then when they brought final plans, we talked about it, and I want to make clear that everybody knows that this is asking for $523,880 of contingency money, program contingency money, in order to build this, because it was not planned that we would build this. However, the school district required it in order to meet their potential code issues. We think this is a very good number as far as the bid price on it, and we're very happy with the number that came in.
Michael?
I would just like to make just a quick comment that to refresh people's memories. We thought we had an agreement with the school board that we were going to share the existing school parking lot, and in large part that's why this site seems just like a win-win. I still think it's a win-win, don't misunderstand me. Having said that, when push came to shove, the school board decided that wasn't going to work, and so that's why the additional parking is requested, and we talked about it.
Any other questions or comments? Shall we approve it? Been moved and seconded that we approve this item. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is approved. I want to also mention in that context that several of us were down there to see the progress on the Senior Wellness Center number 2, and you would be amazed at how quickly it's gone up and how much progress is being made. So if you get a chance to go by there, it's really coming up out of the ground. Looks great. Thank you. All right, item 9.
Item 9 is recommend resolution accepting MAPS 3 Convention Center Demolition Package 2, Project M3-C007. As it says, this is Demolition Package 2 that was used to take down some of the buildings that are in the Convention Center area, and it is complete. And we recommend accepting that project.
It's been moved and seconded. We approve.
I have a question.
Yes.
On the final claim number down there, obviously it looks like a typo or a comma's moved, or is that?
Yeah, I think there's too many sevens there.
So that's 7,000 or 77,000 or?
I'll have to ask staff to help me out. I'm going to, well, I hate to assume, but I think it's more like 7,770.
Is that the final claim being just the last draw against that? Is that what that
It is.
refers to?
Yeah, the whole construction cost was only $155,000.
Okay. Further questions? I think we've had the motion and the second, so we're ready to call the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. It is adopted. Item 10.
Item 10 is recommend resolution approving change order number 3 and amendment number 4, MAPS 3 Trail Improvements Phase 2, Project 2, I-44 West, Will Rogers Trail, increase of $23,371, Project M3-T002. This is quantity revisions in the amendment. As you've seen before, when we get out in the field, the quantities have to be adjusted, and we try to do that timely so that we can keep track of what's being changed. So there's $23,371 of quantity revisions on that. Then I want to point out the change order is a contract extension at no cost, but there is 30 days that were added due to some AT&T telephone utilities in the way, issues that slowed the contractor down. But again, that's at no cost.
Sue, any comments from the committee?
No. Move approval. We did not have a quorum, but we did reach out to some committee members that weren't there and did get their approval also.
All right. It's been moved that we approve. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we approve this resolution. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's approved. Item 11.
Item 11 is recommend resolution approving change order number 3 and amendment number 4, Maps 3 Trail Improvements, Phase 2, Project 1, increase of $41,790.98, Project M3-T002A. Similar to what we just talked about, there are some tree relocations in this change order, $4,000 there, some trail pavement modifications, $17,000. Again, the utilities, we can locate them best we can in plans, but it doesn't always indicate depth. And then tree roots and things that are in there, and it was decided that it was better to change the material and use some reinforced concrete in that area rather than rip out all the roots, because the roots sometimes get entangled with the phone lines and the electric lines and those things. When you pull those out, it pulls the utilities out also. So it was better to go with the reinforced concrete on that. Then also this one has a time extension of 67 days because of some of those issues, but again, at no cost to the project. And then the quantity revisions of $1,600. And then there's a $19,000 item on there for additional trees that were removed on 56th Street.
Any comments?
Approval.
Sue has moved the approval. Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. Is further discussion, questions for Sue or David? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is approved. Item 12.
Item 12 is recommend resolution ratifying and approving addenda numbers 1 and 2, Maps 3 Will Rogers Trail, Phase 2, Project 3, awarding contract, base bid plus alternates 1, 2, and 3, and unit prices to Shell Construction Company Incorporated in the amount of $2,548,525.39, approving contracts and bonds, Project M3-T002B. This is the third piece of the Will Rogers Trail. It's the piece that extends from the river up to about 19th Street Northwest. Very happy about the bid that we got on this, and we're very anxious to get started on this.
Move approval.
Been moved. Is there a second? Been moved and seconded that we approve this. And David, you're saying that this was within the budget that we have?
Yes, sir.
Well, that is good news. All right. Further questions or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It is approved. Item 13.
Item 13 is recommend resolution approving change order number 5 and amendment number 4, Maps 3 Sidewalks Phase 3 Project 2 improvements, increase of $55,410, Project M3-W003A. Again, sidewalk project, loop detectors that were damaged because of removing some ramps. Those loops are essentially just wires that are sawed in and put into the concrete, and when you take some of that concrete out, it damages those. It just cuts them in half. Then there were amended quantities of $52,000 as they went along with the sidewalk project.
Move approval.
Is that the traffic loops, the signal?
It is. The city has two different ways of detecting cars. They have the video detection that you can see the camera that's up on the mast arm, but we also have the loops that are in the concrete, and that's those rectangles that you'll see sawed in there. And
When a car drives over there.
right, it's an electromagnetic induction occurrence there, and those loops come out through the paving and they go into the ground and they go to those little boxes that you see along there. So it's usually what we call the leads that extend from the loops out across the sidewalk that get torn in half.
We have a motion. Is there a second? As we've been moved and seconded, we approve this resolution. Further discussion or questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's approved. David, item 14.
Item 14 is recommend utilizing MAPS 3 Trails funds as matching funds for federal grants for trail connections and amenities. In working with the planning department, they pointed out that there are some grants available and asked if we would be interested in participating in that so that we could leverage the money for the trails to get some federal funds with that. Matt Sandage is here today from our planning department. He's the one that has been helping us with this, and he's got a short presentation he'd like to show you.
Good morning. Matt Sandage, Oklahoma City Planning Department. I want to talk to you about the Transportation Alternatives Program. This is an FHWA, Federal Highway Administration grant program that Oklahoma City has been successful with in years past. There will be $8.4 million available to our urbanized area, so that means that we will be competing against Moore, Norman, Midwest City, Edmond, Yukon, all of those cities that are within our urbanized area. So this is it's a fairly large pot of money as compared to years past. No one city can get more than 56% of the money, so that means that there will be, we could get up to $4.7 million in grant funding. The program requires at least a 20% match. So those projects or those applications that overmatch with 25 or 30% will receive a better score. There's a scoring criteria that the application review committee will use to score out all of the applications from all of the cities. And so by overmatching, we would get a few additional points potentially. So eligible projects are bicycle trail and pedestrian projects, also public transportation as well. We've been working, the planning department has been working very closely with MAPS, but also the Public Works Department and also COTPA to identify projects or applications that might be successful through this program. So we have a total of between 10 and 12 applications. I have 4 project ideas to share with you today that would potentially be MAPS matched, and they're all trail related. So, and I don't know if I mentioned that the maximum grant amount per project is $600,000. So in that limits how much trail that can be built. So I'll show you sort of what we've done to, I guess, remedy that. If we have a larger project, we've decided to chop it in half so that we might be able to get 2 applications out of that and then potentially double our money. The first project is in the South Grand Boulevard area, right adjacent to I-44. Currently, this is part of the South Grand Boulevard Trail. However, down to Woodson Park from the Dell Computer employment area, it is just a sidewalk. It's a 6-foot sidewalk, and it's in good condition, but the idea behind this project is to divide it into, to widen the sidewalk, install the trail, or make it trail standard, and make this actually 2 applications. So this stretch could be divided into 2. Trail would be about $750,000 per section, and so that gets you from Woodson Park to Rockwood Elementary School, and then from the Dell Center down to Rockwood Elementary School. So the first leg of it, I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly. Components of the project would be to make intersection improvements so that users of the trail can cross Southwest 15th Street safely, widen the existing sidewalk out to 10 to 12-foot trail sections. The second section would be to improve the railroad crossing and then also improve Southwest 29th Street crossing and widen out that sidewalk to trail standards. this is just sort of snapshots of the area, is the Southwest 29th intersection. Right now, the sidewalk goes through at sort of a mid-block. The idea in improving this would bring it up to the intersection and provide the appropriate pedestrian activated button to allow for that safe crossing. The second project revolves around the idea of amenitizing or providing components to the West River Trail and also the Will Rogers Trail. We've identified locations where we have access to a crossing water line, and maybe it's a nice vista point where somebody might like to sit and rest and enjoy the trail, take a rest from their bike ride or jog. So we've identified these groupings of projects along each of these trails. The total behind this project is about $250,000. The match requirement, minimum match requirement would be $50,000. That would be the 20%. To reach the 30% match, that would be around $75,000. The final project would be a crossing of the Canadian River, North Canadian River, just south of Lake Overholser. So this would tie into the West River Trail at Eagle Lane and also benefit the users of the Overholser Trail. So a lot of cyclists and runners like to circumnavigate the lake. This is a problem location for the users of the trail because in order to make that loop around the lake, they have to get onto Northwest 10th Street, which there's about 15,000 cars a day. There's high-speed traffic, and so that can be problematic for people using the facility. So the idea behind this project is to add a crossing adjacent to the Northwest 10th Street Bridge. This would be either a separate bike ped bridge or a facility, a cantilever off the side of the Northwest 10th Street Bridge. Another idea would, we had the discussion yesterday about potentially putting a crossing further north towards the lake. There's some difficulties, engineering difficulties in that area because of the grade changes, because of the low-lying area. Additionally, that area is sometimes inundated with water, so that's another issue. So it might be that the more achievable location for doing a bike ped bridge would be closer to 10th Street, and we could also get some additional users of that facility from the nearby residents. So in my discussion yesterday with the subcommittee, we discussed which projects are these projects of interest to the MAPS Trails and Sidewalks Subcommittee, and if so, do we want to move forward with an application and supporting match recommendation of 20, 25, or 30%. Anything above 30% match doesn't get us any extra points in the scoring criteria. However, that last project I showed, that was about a $1.5 million project. The maximum grant funding amount is $600,000, so we would have to overmatch in order to complete that project.
Let me point out that this money is available in the Trails and Sidewalks accounts. Most of it is actually available, and probably all of it that he's talking about is available through the excess from the Will Rogers Trail. So what we would do is we would just earmark that until they hear back whether we were awarded it or not. And then if we aren't, then it's still available there. And I believe the award is in June.
The award will be made in June. And like I said, we're putting in multiple applications. All of our applications will be competing against each other, plus the other cities. But the idea is to get enough applications out there, enough competitive applications out there that we will get some of them funded. There's a chance that none of these will be funded at the end of the day, which that would be sad. But we've got to put them forward to find out.
This isn't, you said you could compete for up to $4.7 million.
Yes.
This isn't $4.7 million with the project, so you have others, I guess, that aren't MAPS related?
Right. That's in working with Public Works and using largely 2007 GEO-bond funds as match. We've identified sidewalk projects and other things to make up for that amount. But we are putting in applications worth more than $4.7 million in hopes that we would get that much.
A quick question. I'm sure I heard you correctly. It's almost unbelievable. So we haven't submitted the app yet. We'll do that this month in May, or next month in May, and we'll hear back from the federal government in June.
So the committee that reviews these, the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments is a part of that committee, and also ODOT. And so their recommendation goes forward to FHWA, and my understanding is whatever that recommendation is, they'll go ahead and, there will be some an administrative process to finalize it, but that recommendation that moves forward is, my understanding is, what will likely be finalized and funded.
Not official, but we'll sort of know.
We'll know, yes.
So just a comment from the committee. Again, we had 4 people at our committee meeting yesterday and then reached out to a couple other committee members that weren't there to let them know about this opportunity. We're excited to be a part of this. We really are happy that the city and the planning committee have brought this opportunity to us, and we're very interested in the chance to really make some additional strides on the trails. And, so we're bringing this to you. We would like to push it forward, please.
Did you have a conversation about the bottom line there, 20,
Yes,
25, or 30%?
Yep, we're interested in making it count the most points. So the committee said
30%?
Yep.
I really appreciated your explanation. I do have this one question. To just generalize this, these are to complete what's already planned, or these are enhancements and improvements that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise?
These wouldn't have been able, so these are part of our larger plan, but we wouldn't have been able to do them otherwise.
Okay. All right. All right. Is there a
Just
motion?
one final thought. I mentioned this too. I think it's great that other city departments, others are looking at obviously what we're doing and reaching out. I think, and I applaud the planning department. I think that's just great. It shows what other people are paying attention to what we're doing, huh, Tom?
Agreed. All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the recommendation included in your packet. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Thank you. It's adopted. That brings us to item 15.
Item 15 is a presentation on the streetcar project, and wanted to bring to you today all the good news that's coming out of that. Doug Smith is here today from Jacobs, and I'd like to invite him up to give you an update on what's going on with the streetcar.
Welcome, Doug.
Mr. Chairman, good morning. Morning, board members. Thanks for the opportunity to share this with you. We have a lot of exciting progress to talk about. There's a lot of moving parts and there's everything going on. So let's go ahead and get started with the vehicles, and then I'll take you through all the components. This is a chart we use to track on the assembly line in Brookville, Pennsylvania, what the progress is of the various sections of the vehicle. There's a quick graphic there of the A, B, and C section of the vehicle. Of course, it's reversible, so the A and B section have a place to drive it, a cab on both ends, and then the C section is that low floor portion where you can walk on or ride on or off. And the C's on that chart indicate the completed portions of the assembly. So as you go down the chart on the rows, you can see that there's the serial number of vehicles 1 through 4 are all incomplete. And then 5 and 6 they haven't started working on yet. Number 7, there's a question mark there because it's going to be into next year and it'll have a serial number that's not in the same sequence. But anyway, you get the idea about kind of how it's going through the assemblies, and you can see the A, B, and C portions. And then all the way over to the right, you can see where it says FA1 and FA2, and that's the final assembly part of it. And you can see that vehicle number 1 has made its way into final assembly 1 and is in work in final assembly 2. So that's where they're putting the A, B, and C parts together, and it's starting to look like a real streetcar. So that's the general idea of where we are on the assembly of the various streetcars. Here's some picture of some Pennsylvanians working on these things. The one on the left is a gentleman running a mag particle testing on some of the welding. And on the right, you're using a device called a Faro 3D, which is measuring the correct position of the walls and floor assemblies to make sure everything is exactly in the right position and assembled and welded correctly exactly where it needs to be. On the sub-assemblies, on the top left there, you see that's the operator's console, the places for the display screens and some of the control panels. There's an inset there of what one of the control panels is looking like, and those are being assembled there. Then on the lower left, you can see a cab console. That's what fits into that A and B end where the operator sits. On the top right, that's an OESS, onboard energy storage system, which is basically the batteries. Of course, you know that's an important part of our hybrid vehicles. And then the roof equipment you can see on the lower right, that's starting to go on to the vehicle number one. So here's the number one picture, and you can see it's starting to look like a real streetcar. It's in final assembly, and it doesn't have the final paint job on it. You know, the one I showed you there was the green color. It's got the 3 shades of green. I showed that one because green happens to be my favorite color, but there's also a red and a blue version, and so there's 2 of each right now, and I believe the 7th vehicle is scheduled to be red. They didn't ask me about that. So anyway, on the bellows installation, those go between the A and the C and the B and the CN. So those are going on. The electrical cabinet wiring happening, and then they're pressing hubs onto the brake axles, on the axles. So the final piece is going together on that. Here's what number 3 looks like. That's the A section of number 3. And here's the final assembly track, and so you can see the number 1 and number 2 vehicles. They've got them there. They're putting them together. And what we know as of yesterday in our weekly conference call with them is that they really want to get the trucks that hold the wheels, they want to get those put on by around mid-June because they need to start being able to roll these things around and their factory floor. And so the truck assemblies are being made off-site. They bring them in. They'll start assembling to the vehicles, and then, of course, we get ready to do some final testing at the factory. So there have been some updates in the schedule which are really not a problem for us, but it is actually changed things a little bit to our favor, and that is they were planning to complete these things in June timeframe with vehicle number 1, and we were going to have to figure out a place to put it. And so we had talked to Brookville about storing them there on site, but they didn't have facilities to really do that because normally when they finish a car, the owner wants it. You know, and so this is a unique situation we were in because our building wasn't going to be ready until late October at best. And so what happened is a couple of their vendors had delivery problems. The Knorr e-brakes come from Munich, Germany, and this is the emergency brake system, and they weren't ready, and they're going to be late in delivery, and so they're not going to be ready to ship in June. It's more likely they'll be ready to ship in October, which is perfect for us. So the ABB propulsion units, these connect to the drive motors, and they go on the roof, and those are running late as well. So to summarize that situation, we now have a revised schedule of late October. They're fine on their contract. They're not due to deliver vehicle number 1 until December, so we're well within that time frame. And of course, we don't need any storage now to deal with that. So good situation on the schedule. Probably one of the only times we talk about a delay on a project being a good thing, right? Amendment 5 is on your agenda today. It has about $300,000 worth of spare parts that are in an amendment. This is something that was discussed with Embark, and we had it on your agenda previously a month or 2 ago. And so anyway, this brings the total spare part package to something that everyone is happy with. It's going to be perfect to be able to put these things into operation and gets everyone what they need. There were some modifications to the CCTV system. This is what there are interior and exterior cameras on the vehicle. There's quite a few of them because there are no mirrors that the drivers use. Everything is operated by TV screens on the consoles, both interior and exterior. So it was a real important system. We needed to make some adjustments to it, and so we have a small amendment item here to take care of that, some of the design on that. Moving on to the maintenance facility. I'll give you an update. Of course, this is the rendering that we show you of what it looks like, and here's the steel going up. There's a lot of activity at this site, and the steel erection is actually nearing completion. and getting ready to, actually in a couple of weeks, start laying and embedding rail into the building area. Just to give you an idea of how much has been going on, there's a shot of the end of February, and you can see the end of March how that has changed. And here's a more up-to-date picture of the construction. You can see our maintenance bays. We have 3 tracks going there. We have actually 4 with the 2 maintenance positions, the wash track and the storage track. That's that big roof covering all that. And then in the foreground to the right is the office. You can see the metal studs going up, so that office space is all framed out. And then looking, this is from the east side, looking through the building, you can see areas there where the insets have been put into the slab. That's where we're going to embed the rail into those service positions. And on the right, you can see the rails over the maintenance pit where we've been laying track over that. And then to the right in the high position, that's the mezzanine, getting ready to pour concrete on that, and that's where they access the roof of the vehicles. This is the other end of that maintenance position, and you can see the stairs going up to the mezzanine. So things are really starting to come together on the inside of that building now. There is a change order on this one. The main item on the change order is an electrical item for cable and conduit for charging pedestals. And what happened here is when we went to the bid on the maintenance facility, we didn't know exactly where the plug-in was going to be on the side of the car. And Brookfield gave us that information, and we had to make some adjustments in the electrical plug-ins to accommodate the A and B end and the direction of the vehicles in the 2 maintenance positions, being able to get them plugged in to charge up the batteries overnight. Now, that's the main item. There's a couple of minor items related to the JIP sheathing and adjustment in the retaining wall around the outside. That's on your agenda as well. Now I'm going to shift to the main line. Of course, we had rail shipped into Oklahoma City, about 800 metric tons, and some of it is stored down on Southwest 10th Street, and then a bunch of it is up there on North Broadway. And so what they've done is they've had crews come in, and specialty crews, and they have this welding machine you see there on the top left, and they weld those pieces of rail together and make these long strings we call CWR, continuous welded rail. So those are now stored in the 2 laydown areas, and they're ready to be pulled into the streets when they open up the street and they're ready to embed it. So you can see there's the pile that's stored down on Southwest 10th, and they pull off of that pile. This is typically done in the middle of the night, and I'm going to show you some pictures of that here in a second. One of the things, there's lots of moving parts, and just as with the schedule on the streetcars versus the maintenance facility, we're always trying to chase one thing or another. And the track work is something that we're trying to resolve right now. We have some issues with the delivery of some of the track work pieces, and I wanted to make you aware of that. We have the Boulevard corridor, and the 3 red pieces right there are coming later than we'd hoped, and so we're coordinating that with the Boulevard construction and trying to work that out. But other than that, the deliveries are scheduled on the track work, and they fit into our schedule fairly well. We have to supply that to the mainline contractor. These turnouts are the switches that go in the intersection, so when we're making a turn or coming in from an emerge point, that's where we have all those turnouts and switches. So we're working on that issue. On the mainline schedule, this is the general contractor, Herzog Stacy Woodbeck. This is their segment, and they plan it in segments. And so you kind of look at that. The green area, of course, that's Bricktown. There's been a lot of activity there. I'll show you some pictures of that. Joe Carter, Reno are being, and much of that is complete. Then you see sort of the orange segment wrapping around, segment 5. That's where the south end of that Bricktown loop comes around and ties into the boulevard. We're getting progress on that. And then that blue section, segment 1 down at the bottom, that's that non-revenue track coming down to the maintenance facility. We're getting ready to see a lot of activity there. So where we're at is that if you look at that March 2018 milestone, complete Bricktown loop, that's really what we're trying to get to right now, and the general contractor's focused on everything on that south end, because that's a milestone for them in their contract. They've got to get that ready to go so we can start testing Bricktown. And just a reminder, I get asked about this, are we going to revenue service on that? And the answer is no. We're not doing any revenue service until we open up in November of 2018, but it does allow us to do some testing running it all the way around that loop and putting hours on our vehicles and getting them ready for all the appropriate sign-offs. So we are on schedule for the November 2018 opening. All the various parts, including the vehicles maintenance facility main line, it's all scheduled to all come together at that time. And so anyway, you can see the other color codes on there of the other segments. This is, they work their way north, and that'll be going into late this year and early next year. They'll start working their way towards those segments. We do have land acquisition going on. Most of it's done. Some of it's in eminent domain. You can see the blue areas I've highlighted on there, number 6 and 8, that's up on 11th Street. Number 2 is our traction power substation. That's a parking lot north of 4th. And number 13 is our corner clip where we go from North Hudson where we turn onto 4th, and we're clipping off that parking lot there. So we have those scheduled, and the city legal department has got those all queued up in the eminent domain process, and they've projected when we will have access to those properties, and all fits great in our schedule. So this has all been taken care of and is on track. So here's some pictures. This is the nighttime. It's probably about 3 a.m. when this is happening. We're pulling off of Southwest 10th and onto the Robinson Bridge and over the top. And there's a nice one on the right of the city skyline in the middle of the night. And of course, we do this when we're not going to interrupt traffic. And then what they do is they take it in one of these cuts in the road, and this one is there along Reno, and they drop it in there, and then they pour concrete around it. So here's a completed one in Joe Carter. This all the ones looking north, the other one looking south. They're along Joe Carter, so that's, of course, that's embedded rail that's ready to drive on. It's ready for a train to be on it, and it's ready to go. Here's one in Reno, again looking east and west, and similarly, this is newer construction, and as you may be aware, this is where they're working right now, headed west on Reno. And this was actually just from earlier this week, and they just made their way over that Bricktown Bridge. We're doing a little modification to that handrail right there by that sidewalk, but anyway, didn't make it over that bridge, and they'll head down to the BNSF tracks, and they'll stop at that location, then they'll move on and do another segment. All right, so to kind of finish up the update here, we're going to have Kristen come up, and she's going to talk to you about her outreach activities. These are the outreach slides. You probably, those of you that get the emails, you'll recognize these. Kristen?
Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to walk you all through the construction that's happening. The first one that we're looking at here, so we sent a utility crew up to Dewey to start all of the work on the manholes there. And then as of about a week ago, they moved down to 10th Street, so we'll take a look at that. So this is the traffic control for 10th Street. They're still working there. It's going to be set up like this till the 26th. I have regular meetings scheduled with St. Anthony. I send St. Anthony updates as well as EMSA because you can see this is where their ambulance access is, so that's very important. So I have to update them every Tuesday and every Friday. And then I've had multiple meetings with Kaisers to talk about their parking situation, make sure that they're okay with everything that's happening, so I give them regular updates as well. And then this is over on Joe Carter. This configuration is going to be set up like this for some time. The platform, which is kind of, let's see, Flaming Lips Alley just south of there, that work is going to start on May the 1st. And then I've also had multiple meetings with the ballpark. Their opening day was the first week of April. So getting all of this wrapped up was really important to them, and they were very happy with how it all worked out. You can see a box up there. This is actually where a substation is going to be. So we worked with them on relocating their Connex box, and now you can see there's trenching happening up there. This is where all the conduit's going to be put in for that substation. So again, this will look like this for a couple more weeks. Then this is over at Southwest 2nd and Hudson. They're doing some major sanitary sewer work here, so this is going to be a couple more weeks as well for a full closure. And I've had multiple conversations with Ira's Tire Shop, so they're well aware. And then this is back on Reno. The next platform location is actually at the Ballpark Plaza. So once they finish the one over on Joe Carter, they'll swing around and start this one. So this configuration will look like this for a little bit. There's also some bridge work being done. They're going to construct a small concrete retention wall over there. So again, that's over by the Whiskey Chicks location. And then Mickey Mantle, they're finishing up our biggest goal for Reno was the Memorial Marathon. and especially Mickey Mantle because that's part of their route. So their drop dead date was the 28th, and we're still on schedule, and they're working very hard to get all this wrapped up, opened up for the Memorial Marathon, and then they'll continue working down Reno. So you can see in this configuration, we actually stopped at Oklahoma, again, for the marathon, and then they'll come back after that's done and do that last little chunk over to the BNSF Bridge. And then this is all of Hudson. So this is the non-revenue line from Southwest 3rd down to Southwest 7th. They're going to be doing the road demolition and track installation. This is actually the first location where they started their OCS foundation work, so they've done some drilling there. And then as of this week, they've also sent an OCS crew over to Sheridan to start their foundation work as well as road demolition. And then this is the small chunk where the boulevard is happening. So they've done, you can see the saw cutting and road demolition if you drive down there now, and then they'll be doing the track installation next for this portion. And then, so I continue to have meetings with city services and all of the event coordinators so we can talk about reroutes for things. I just recently had a meeting with the Red Earth Parade people, and their route is fine this year. It was just a matter of maybe tweaking their staging location, and they were fine with that. Like I said, multiple meetings with the Bricktown Ballpark staff and with the hospitals. I also helped secure the property for TPSS number 4 for that substation. And then we only have 2 temporary construction easements left to take care of. I attended a streetcar stop naming meeting, and then we still have our monthly meetings for our communication plan implementation. This is still ongoing and will be. And then I gave presentations to both the bid board and the Downtown Oklahoma City board. And then I'll have an Automobile Alley board meeting to present at next month in May. And then I still attend the weekly traffic management meetings just to keep everybody up to date on what's happening. And then we have our weekly construction meetings every Tuesday. This is a lot of meetings. And then third-party utility meetings. And then it's really just once I go to these meetings, I go back and make a lot of phone calls and emails, and just to let people know that we're coming, and then what the construction will look like in their area. Face-to-face meetings, like I said, with EMSA, Kaiser's, Gaylord Pickens Heritage Museum, Myriad Gardens to talk about their upcoming events and what the schedule is going to be looking like. And then, like you saw here, the construction updates are put together every Friday afternoon, and they're emailed out to everybody. Do y'all have any questions?
I just had a question about the segments of rail that you're moving in at night. How long are those? When they've welded them together and you're moving them out there at night?
350, 400 feet.
You're working those down the streets that long? No wonder it's done at night.
Yeah, they use rollers and take them around the curves, and they bend a little bit. We have to keep an eye on making sure they're not bending them too much. But yeah, that's how they do it.
I guess I would assume they'd be welding them in place. I didn't realize how that large a segments they were.
Yeah, the shop, when they can set up a welding operation like that, the machine is much more accurate. We get a lot better welds. They use a different process when they're welding them together in the street. And it's not as good of a weld. It's good enough, but we get a much better weld when the machine comes in.
Yeah.
And so we're really glad that they do it that way.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Well, thank you, Doug. Doug described in his presentation the next 2 items on our agenda, the resolutions for amendments. David, you want to take us through those 2? Let's start with number 16.
Yes, sir. Item 16 is recommend resolution approving amendment number 5, the contract with Brookville Equipment Corporation for the MAPS 3 modern streetcar vehicles, increase of $313,177, project M3-S005. And as you said, Doug went over the change order. The bulk of that is for spare parts.
I do want to mention that both Nathaniel and Zane were at the subcommittee meeting, and they did have a quorum, as I believe, and so this does come with the recommendation of the subcommittee. They both had a conflict, could not be with us today, but they were both there for the subcommittee meeting. So, are there questions? Been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution contained in item 16 on the agenda. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is adopted. That brings us to item 17, David.
Item 17 is recommend resolution approving change order number 3, MAPS 3, streetcar storage and maintenance facility, increase of $84,253, project M3-S006. Again, Doug described that. It is the pedestals for the charging stations that are in the maintenance facility. And this also comes with the recommendation from the subcommittee.
Questions? Shall we approve it? Been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is approved. Thank you, Doug and Kristen, for the presentation. That brings us to item 18. David, you want to... well, let me start with this. I do want to tell you all that at our last meeting, Michael Adams had requested that we take a look at kind of where we are financially, and the staff has spent a lot of time, effort, and work with ADG and our consultants, and we have a report, an important report, to give to everybody today. So, David, tell us about it.
That's right, and this is in anticipation of what we believe we'll be discussing at our next meeting, and that is the underfunded park that we'll be looking at. So as you said, in reaction to Mr. Adams' comments, and also with that coming up, we've prepared this report, and this report is in two pieces because there was a whole lot of information to bring to you, so we've broken it into two phases. Today's phase isn't going to require any kind of action or decisions or anything. Today is just informational to help prepare us for when we do go to the next meeting and we have some decisions to make with the park. So again, no decisions necessary today. Certainly discussion would be appropriate, but no decisions. And I asked Mike Mize to come up here and do this presentation for us, but we've worked together on preparing this, so I'd like to hand it to him.
Thank you. Mike, welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, board members, Manager Todd, as David said, we've worked very closely with MAPS staff on this, and also with Craig Freeman, the City Finance Director, to provide this information for you today so that you will have an opportunity between now and your next meeting to better understand where we are financially with respect to the budget status on each of the projects and the overall program as well. So as David said, there's no real need here for action today, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and as I'm sure Craig is as well. So you'll see a brief update of the budget status, the current status of each of the individual projects. Those numbers are current as of April 10th. For example, the numbers that you'll see today about the overall program contingency don't reflect the $523,000 that you recommended today come out of contingency funds, because that hasn't yet been approved by City Council. But these are the numbers that were current as of April 10th. One of the things that we think is important, and you'll see this slide again toward the end, we've come up with what we believe are important factors for you to consider while you're thinking about this between now and the next meeting. I'm just going to read through these quickly. We think that they're very important both for the individual projects, which may require or need additional funding, but it's also important for the overall program. And there are things like, has the project already received funds in addition to its I-Plan budget? Have the project I-Plan expectations been met? Will the items positively impact project programming? Will the items increase operational efficiency? Will the items result in additional revenue generation? Is the request scalable, or another way to put that is partial funding an option? What is the impact to the schedule? What happens if the items are postponed? You may have other factors that you think are important as well. These are the ones that we're suggesting that as a group you might consider.
Mike, I want to ask you a question about the item number 1, the receipt of additional funds. So when we think about things like we're applying for for trails that we talked about today, or when on transit, when we got a federal grant for the Santa Fe, are you talking about only have they received additional funds from us, from inside the MAPS program, or are you thinking additional funds from external sources as well?
I think when we put this together, we were thinking MAPS funds.
Okay, thank you.
And frankly, your comment about the Santa Fe station, we hadn't really thought about that, but we were thinking about have projects received additional funds either from excess collections or from program contingency from the MAPS pool of money.
Thank you. Go ahead.
We're going to give you individual project updates on all of the MAPS projects. We're going to start with the convention center. We expect that project to bid in 2018. I think we've reported to the convention center subcommittee, and I can't remember if we've reported to this body, but the current budget cost estimates, one of which was generated by Populous, another which was generated by ADG, anticipate that this project will come in within budget. Just to give you a rundown of where we are on the actual current budget for the convention center, the original I-Plan budget was $252 million. The substation relocation was $30. Program contingency contributed $6 million to the convention center in 2014, which gave a revised budget of $288 million. Excuse me, I had a couple of zeros there, Mike. The next two line items show what's currently obligated. We've obligated $29 million for the relocation of the substation, which we also believe is currently on schedule for completion in October. And then other obligated funds, which include the single biggest piece of that is A&E services, for a current project balance of $214 million, recognizing that contains both project contingency and our budgeted construction cost. One of the things we'll do on each of these projects is show what we know to be potential additional items that could be considered for each of the projects. And the one thing that we've identified here is either a pedestrian bridge from the convention center to the hotel or a shaded plaza over 4th Street. Streetcar status, actually Doug did a much better job of this than I could. This is just a summary. You know it's under construction. We had the groundbreaking. We anticipate operation in November of 2018. The construction contract came in under budget. Current budget status, we originally had a budget of 120, round numbers, $129 million. You may remember that when we added the Bricktown Loop, we went to program contingency funds and added $3 million to the project based on the estimates that we had at the time for a revised budget of $131 million, almost $132 million. We currently have obligated $121 million. That's the actual mainline work, the cars, and the related engineering. The current project balance shows $10 million. $5 million of that is project contingency, and the easy way to describe another $3 million is we didn't need that $3 million because the construction contract came in so favorably. So that's the bulk of that $10 million that's left in the current project balance. The one thing that we've identified as an additional consideration, Doug told you this morning, we are acquiring the actual curb track sections for the 5th Street turnback so that those could be installed as part of the current mainline construction, but the straight track that goes in between those has not been included. River, Phase 1 is partially complete. Phase 2 is complete. Phase 3, the Whitewater, is complete. Phase 4 has not been completed. The budget for the river, the original I-Plan budget, $57 million. We've added from excess collections a number of things, including the pedestrian bridge and other items, to primarily the Whitewater facility for about $786,000 for a revised budget of almost $60 million. We've currently obligated, not $60 million, $58 million. We've currently obligated all but $95,000 of that money. The river folks have put together a fairly comprehensive list of things that they would like to try to see included if there were funds available. This includes additional lighting, possibly the windscreen, grandstands, and a number of the items that were originally included in either Phase 1, which hadn't been completed, or Phase 4, which we haven't even started.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
I think on the river list of projects, I think the major item was the second floor on the building.
Thanks, Mike.
I don't think the windscreens are in there. I don't think
You're right.
It's the grandstands in there. I think this
completion of the second floor.
Right.
And you may remember, I appreciate that, Mike. You may remember that there is structure for a second floor in that facility, but because of budget constraints, we did not complete it. Completion of that is a significant item in this $8 million. Once again, Mike. I think you're right. The windscreens are out. I appreciate that. Fairground status, this is a pretty easy one. We're complete. We're complete. We're under budget, and there's a current project balance on that project of $2.5 million. We haven't identified any particular items that have been mentioned with respect for additional consideration by the fairgrounds. Senior health and wellness, these numbers get a little bit, there's a lot of numbers on the screen. It's really not, it's pretty easy to understand, really. It's the original budget was the $52.3 million. Then Wellness Center number 1, we did add money to Wellness Center number 1. That's included in the revised Wellness Center number 1 budget. I've got a breakdown of that in the next slide. And then the original I-Plan budgeted numbers for 2, 3, and 4 for a current total budget of $53,143,000. This is the status of Wellness Center number 1. Original budget $11.7 million. We added $600,000 from program contingency to include alternates to the base bid, much of which included finishes and other functional items within Wellness Center number 1. You've just recently approved $159,000 in excess collections for the improvements to the gym and a couple of other items for a revised budget of $12.5 million. And we've obligated from Wellness Center number 1 $12,267,000 for a project balance of $227. Wellness Center number 2, original budget $12.8 million, current obligations $12.4 million for a current project balance of $417,000. Senior Wellness number 3, the I-Plan budget of $13 million. Current obligated, just a quick explanation about that. I know we haven't started Wellness Center number 3, but Mike, and in particular, is aware of the fact that when we started the Wellness Center process, there was a lot of work that went on with consultants, with ADG, and with other folks to try and determine exactly what these centers were going to look like and how we were going to operate them. And that was cost that we spread over all 4 of the Wellness Center projects, which is why you see an obligated number up there for a project which, in theory, we haven't started specifically, but those are real costs that have been incurred on this project. And the same, as you can see, for Wellness Center number 4. Additional considerations for senior health and wellness, potential Wellness Center number 5. We've got a $15 million number up there because we don't know what time frame that might take place. So we've tried to be conservative about inflation costs and things like that, and have used a $15 million number, which can certainly be reduced as we get closer, if we were to get closer to a time where we actually were going to build a fifth center. Trails, the West River Trail is complete. Will Rogers Trail is nearly complete, but it's under construction. Lake Draper Trail is in design, and the Airport Trail is not complete. The budget summary, $39,518,000, and we're currently either within or below budget on each of those projects. The West River Trail, you may recall, came in under budget. We have a current balance in that project of $1.6 million. The Will Rogers Trail came in even better with respect to budget. We now have a project balance in the Will Rogers Trail of almost $3.5 million. The Lake Draper and Airport Trail, what we have so far is architectural and engineering fees obligated. The project, after the project bids, we'll know better where we stand with respect to the overall project budget. Additional considerations for the trails, things like signage, water fountains, shelters, and restrooms. Sidewalks, current alignment miles completed, current alignment miles obligated is 51. You may recall that City Council added $9 million from excess collections, which gave us 25 miles. That 25 is included in the 51. You may remember that there were a lot of challenges on the sidewalks. We've got a photograph here of a sidewalk that went through an historic neighborhood, and in many of the places where we did that and we had grade changes, we were required to put in retaining walls to help maintain that property owner's actual property. We had many more curb cuts, many more utility conflicts than we thought. So this is a summary of where we stand with the overall sidewalks budget. We started in MAPS. The MAPS budget was $9.1 million. We added $9 million for a total of $18 million. We've currently obligated $13 million. The current project balance is $4.8 million, but that does not yet reflect Phase 4 of the sidewalks. Additional considerations, additional miles. The park status. And we're doing this one last in part because it was a little bit of the focus in Mike Adams' questioning. We wanted to provide information about all of the projects because his timing could not be better with respect to trying to determine where we are with respect to excess collections and contingency. But the park, because it's going to be bid very soon, is really an area that we need to focus on as well. That bid opening date, David, is that going to slide to May 9th? Yeah.
Yes, sir. As of yesterday, we moved that to the 9th.
And the reason it's sliding is we've had considerable interest on the part of contractors to bid this. We know of 5 very qualified contractors who are going to bid it, and they've just had a number of really good questions, and we want to make sure that we get those questions answered as well as we possibly can, so we've added a week to the bid schedule. That does not change the Lower Park bid opening date, which we expect right now in the I-Plan schedule at first quarter of 2020. Okay. This was the most complicated slide that we had. I've got a little cheat sheet. There are a lot of numbers up there and things moved back and forth, but I've got a little summary of what we have done as a group,
with the upper and lower park budgets. I mean, you may recall that originally we had a phase one, which was about a $9 million piece that when we thought that the boulevard was going to be completed in 2014, we budgeted a small amount to try and dress up the south side of the boulevard. When it became apparent that the boulevard was not going to be complete in that time frame, we combined what we called what was then phase one with phase two, which was the upper park. So now we only have the upper park. In April of 2014, we determined that there wasn't enough money in the lower park to do the kind of programming that we'd all hoped for. So approximately $10 million was moved from the upper park to the lower park. In July of 2015, when it became clear that all of the additional utility costs and infrastructure costs that we'd incurred were taking away from the actual construction amount available in the upper park, we took $4 million out of the lower park and added it back to the upper park, which leaves us with a current project balance of $87.7 million. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or try to. But I want to thank actually the MAP staff for helping me put that together. This one got a little bit complicated.
That $87 million is what's left.
Correct.
That's basically the construction cost for the upper park, which is budgeted how much?
We currently have a construction budget for the upper park of, is it 50? Is that?
That's what's out for bid right now?
Correct. 60.5 is what the current estimate is for the park construction and all of the alternates. But we only have about $52 million available in construction for the upper park. If those alternates come in, if the bids come in favorably, we may be able to take some of those alternates. But part of the issue is going to be if the base bid comes in where we anticipate it, we will not be able to include a lot of the alternates.
So of the $87 million in the project, $52 million of it is essentially for?
Is upper park construction.
Upper park, and the other 35 would be the lower park.
Lower park construction and project and the project contingencies
All right.
that we have included in there as well. And additional, I mean, since we haven't
The
done
land
design of the
acquisition.
lower park, there's design fees included in there for the lower park.
Because all the land's not been acquired either, has it?
What's that?
Not all the land's even been acquired, has it?
David, we're pretty close.
We're very close to the lower part, but yeah, it isn't finalized.
This is the upper park budget with a current project balance of $58 million, but remember that includes a significant amount of project contingency, so we've got much less than that budgeted for actual construction. This is a list of the upper park alternates. I know the park subcommittee has seen this list many times, but the single biggest item on that list is a $7 million fountain. The fact that we had so many additional costs when we did infrastructure has really taken away from our ability to include all of these items in the base bid. So the hope is that we get favorable bids, but I think it's fair to say that we're going to require, if we're going to complete the park and complete all these items, some of which are included because they would help generate excess revenue. They may increase operating efficiency in the park. But if we're going to include these, I think it's going to be likely that we're going to need to look at either excess collections or contingency to complete them. This is where we are currently on the lower park, and that current obligated obviously represents a lot of land acquisition. Park additional considerations, as I said, improvements for operations, and the utility overruns line item is just really up there to reflect the fact that we had a lot of unexpected costs in this project, which have resulted in a potential need to seek funds from other areas in the MAPS project. And then a list of the alternates, and then there are even additional requests by the foundation for operating efficiency and revenue generation. In the I-Plan, infrastructure and contingency were a line item which, as you may recall, there was $30 million in there for the substation relocation, and there was a $17 million program contingency number, which is where we get the $47 million. The convention center received $6 million of that total 47, and actually came out of the 17. The streetcar received 3, wellness received some. So the total allocations out of those funds, after you allocate the $29 million for the substation relocation, leaves a balance in those two funds of $7 million for. And these are previous allocations out of excess collections, which totaled $10 million. This is just kind of a summary list of some of the items that we detailed in each of the individual project items that we showed today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the financial expert, Craig Freeman.
Thank you, Mike.
Sure.
I've just got a couple of slides here that we'll look at. First, starting off with just taking a look at where we are right now with our revenues. So we went ahead and took this updated through the middle of April. Sales tax check typically comes, the first part of the month. So we took it through the middle of April. So it's $714.3 million in revenue that's been collected so far. Interest collections, and I think this is actually just through March, I believe, is $13.8 million. And then there was a little bit of revenue from building rental. So a total of $728.3 million has been collected to date. This slide we put together to take a look first at what our original revenue projections were on the sales tax itself, because as you know, the interest revenues were not incorporated in those revenue projections. They weren't incorporated into the original budget. So to start with, where were we looking at the original revenues? And so if you look at the very top there on those top two lines on the left column of numbers, the $687.5 million is if you took the targets that from the original projections that were really probably prepared 8.5 years ago in preparing for the election, if you took those numbers and took the actual monthly projections for that, we would be at about $687 million right now. If you look right across from that at the current projection line, that 714.3 is the number we looked at on the previous page of what we've actually collected. So right now we're a little under $27 million over the original projection to date. The next line on that left column is the $89.6 million, and that's how much, if we still followed those same projections, taking those out monthly, we would earn about $89.6 million to the end of the tax. So the tax ends in December. We'll get a full check in January, because there's a little bit of lag in the remittances, and then you get about a half a check in, equal to about a half a check in February. And so the projection would be $89.7 million. Well, again, if we go back over now to that right-hand column, on our current projections, it's $83.1 million. And the way we arrived at that projection at the end of the year is we used the same assumptions working with our economists that we're using for our budget, for the operating budget that we're getting ready to propose or introduce to the council on Tuesday. We use those same projections, and that is that we would have in this next month's check that we would see about flat, maybe a slight decline is what they're projecting. They're expecting our June check to be the first check that we actually start to see growth come back. I think we're now in about 18 of the last 19 months we've been in decline. I know you all have been watching that, and that's 18 of the last 19 months in decline compared to the same month of the previous year. And so that's been a long stretch. This is going to be, as we finish this year, we'll probably finish about 4% down from last year. This is the second consecutive year of decline. This is the first time in 30 years that the city has seen 2 consecutive years of decline in sales tax. So it's a significant change. It's had a significant impact. And what that did was finally brought us to the point, we went so many months where those sales tax projections exceeded the original MAPS projections. We finally, in the last year, got to where those started to drop below that. We had many times that we could actually see sales tax decline and still exceed the original projection that we had on the MAP sales tax. We've now dropped down far enough that with next year we're projecting 2.5% growth on sales tax for the year. With that growth projected, we're still going to lose ground from where we are right now. As I said earlier, we're about $27 million over the original projection. Well, if you look at it, just looking at those 2 lines of total sales tax from original projection at the 777.2 compared to the 797.4, we're going to be about $20 million over is what we're estimating by the end of the year just in the sales tax. So we'll continue to lose some ground even though we should see sales tax start to improve from what we've seen over the last few months, but it's still going to be a decline and we're going to lose some ground from where we are right now is what our expectation is. So if we go over and just focus now, so that first column got us to the 777. We've talked through the first few rows there on the current projections to get to the 797 in sales tax that we're projecting to the end of the year. Interest calculator collected so far through March is $13.8 million. Our projection right now that we're using, and this doesn't just go through the end of the tax, it's as the program continues on. What we've reached now is we've reached kind of a peak where there's a maximum level of cash that's been reserved for those projects so we can move forward on the projects, and we're seeing our interest rates climb back to where they had been. And I say climb. They've moved back a little bit higher. So we had seen several years where I think the lowest year we were at about 50 basis points or about 0.5% in interest earnings that we would receive. We're now closer to about 1% and expecting those to continue to rise. I think our cash balances in the MAPS fund right now are somewhere around $450 million. And so you can do the math on that. In this current year alone, we've received, and it's shown in that $13.8 million, but we've received about $3.2 million in interest earnings in this year so far. And we're expecting in the last quarter to receive about another $1 million. So that $6 million we believe is very conservative. We'll probably exceed that. But just to be conservative on that, because part of it depends on how quickly we spend down the funds, and the other is what the interest rates do over the next few years. So if we use that estimate on the interest, we're at $19.8 million in interest. We add in the $154,000 in building rental that was collected earlier to get us to a total revenue projection of $817.4 million. The current budget, and this is the current MAPS budget, is $786.9 million. That adds in those commitments of additional or excess revenues. So it's $786.9 million. The projected excess revenue, then the difference between revenue collected and the current budget is about $30.4 million. The contingency in the program contingency is $7.4 million, and that's without including the decisions that were made today, but it still gives you an approximation to get us down to about $37.8 million that we're expecting in available revenues in the future, the decisions that can be made by the board as to how those are used. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have on revenue.
So that 37.8 is the excess collections, the remaining contingencies, and I guess that's it.
Yes.
Any interest in all that we have available for, you had a list of, Mike had a list of other considerations, all
Yes,
the
sir.
different projects out there, and it came to somewhere like $70 million. So there's $70 million worth of potential projects that are kind of on the table now, that the various committees and everybody's considering, and we're estimating, and I guess we've already spent $500,000 of that.
Right.
37 today.
Right.
So
we lost a little bit of ground this morning.
so there's $37 million in funds, potentially funds available to
Yes, sir.
allocate to that $70 million in wish list items. And so I think that was kind of where I was when I raised the question last month and talked to David, where I was kind of trying to get a handle around, what's on the table for projects that, are under consideration for more funding, and how much funding do we think we'll have. And guess the first big question will probably come up next month when they open the park bid.
Yeah.
And so I just thought it was important that we kind of get those numbers on the table. So I think that will be the time next month, and we'll have to consider whether, how to address, if there is, hopefully we won't have, but if there is a need for more funding, are we going to suggest the park deal with that within their own budget first? Because we still have some other big projects out there. We still don't know what the convention center is going to do. We still don't have a firm number on the lower park. They have money in the park budget with their lower park phase and their contingency to deal with at least some of that. And we've already pointed out, I guess, some money's been shifted around back and forth. We could simply put it back into the upper park, to cover part of that process. Or we just leave all that alone and just deal with any needs by program contingencies or excess collections, recognizing that we don't yet know what other items may come up with some of the projects, which probably in a year or so we'll know a lot more about where we are. So I think
Well, it's been very helpful. I've got two questions for you. The interest that we earn on this, is this part of the city's overall investment portfolio where it might not just all be interest, but they invest in lots of things, or is it 100% fixed income interest? Is it all interest?
Yes, it is. It's all interest.
So no broad portfolio. It's just, so interest rates affect
there are
us.
very strict guidelines that we follow in our investments, and so it's fixed incomes. It'll be treasuries, agencies, and we do some callables, but it's all going to be fixed income type revenues.
Okay. So what's going on with interest rates will affect us.
Yes, sir.
Second question, and I'm not sure I can ask this the right way, so maybe Mike and David can help me. When we started, we had this huge algebra problem about spending the money on pace with what we were collecting. So we're coming to the end of the year, and you said in January, and then maybe in February, we'll get an additional check. But at some point, no later than February of 2018, no more collections are coming into this. So the question that I'm interested in you thinking about for us as we try to decide things like, are we going to do a fifth wellness center, is we will not be collecting any more money, but we will be getting some more interest.
Yes, sir.
So rather than just adopt the idea that we're not collecting any more money, so there's no reason to wait, let's just start spending. We accelerate the pace. If we're behind, we just accelerate the pace of what we're doing because no more money is coming in. The fact is, we will be getting some more interest, presumably.
That's correct.
And I'd be kind of interested in knowing when we get to that day, when do we need to slow down, or do we need to just go ahead and spend the money as fast as we can because no more collections? I'd like to be able to compare the pace of inflation versus how we're doing on the interest. Would you just think about that for us?
Sure.
So that when we come to the end of the collection period, you could help us see, should we accelerate the pace of something, or should we go along with our plan of doing it in a real orderly, I'm going to say, well-paced
Yes, sir.
place?
We'd be glad to look at that. Yes, sir. And what we've looked at right now with our assumptions, and again, I said it's very conservative.
Yes.
As we've looked at our projections on the interest, we tried to assume that, that balances will be spending down on the projects and just following kind of the pace that we followed previously. If something advanced, it would have an effect, but it's not going to take us off of that estimate. And again, the likelihood is we're going to exceed that estimate, regardless of what you decide on your pace. I think by the time you can get projects bid and get through the process, I think the way things are working right now, I'm confident that we'll reach those numbers with the interest projections. But we'll definitely give that some more thought.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else have a question?
Just to finish up, I told you you'd see this slide again, and this is the considerations that we talked about. I do want to make one clarification to something that I said earlier. The table that shows the summary of projects, which Mike Adams totaled up to about $70 million, I said that it included all of the projects that I talked about today. It also includes the proposed parking garage on the northeast corner of the convention center. I just want to make that clarification. It's we've got $10 million in that schedule for the parking garage. It's part of that $70 million to be considered. So as you go forward between now and the next meeting, that schedule of that summary schedule of items, and I think this list of factors to consider are the things that I would suggest are most important to look at. You also have all of the detail with respect to the individual projects and where they are in their current budget and their completion status. So we would ask that you take all that into consideration, and at the next meeting, we will have had the benefit of receiving the Upper Park bids, so we'll have a much better idea of where we stand with the Upper Park and specifically what items we may be able to include in that base bid and the alternates, or which items would need additional funding to complete the park. Any other questions?
Bob? Mike, could you, on that $2 million parking garage, could you somehow cite that with an asterisk or somewhere, so will remind me at least that is included in here?
Well,
it is an asterisk?
It is in here.
I'm sorry?
It is on the schedule. I just failed to mention it. When I talked about the schedule, Mike, I said that it was a summary of the things that I previously talked about. I hadn't mentioned the parking garage. I just wanted to make sure that you understood that it was on there.
You have the Union Station on there too, and you really didn't talk about it either.
Well, no, Union Station is something that you're right, that I had not talked about. That 10 million plus or minus, depending on what were to happen with Union Station, that 10 million could easily get to 15, depending on the use of Union Station. Given the fact that that's an historic building, the cost to renovate that building is going to be pretty significant.
Well, I think on the Union Station, it hasn't really been brought up before. It's not a match project. It's not part of the park's budget or plan, but it seems to me that it's critical for the operation of the park. And somebody somehow is going to have to put some money into it. And I don't guess there's any other urban renewal city, nobody else has that on their budget to do anything with. And so it was just an idea that, maybe that's a place that if there were excess MAPS funds, that it might be a place for it to go that makes sense to generate revenue and things. So
okay.
I think, like I said, the 70 million's the wish list, and maybe more than that, but we don't have near the money to do all of them, so we're going to have some hard decisions to make. And I don't think we've been real consistent in the way we've addressed some of these things in the past. Some subcommittees have dealt with budget overruns by keeping within the project and using up money from the later phases and their contingency. The river did that. I think the trails today, the proposal today from the trails was not to ask for more money for these matching funds. They're going to deal with it within their project. Other subcommittees have come to us and asked for money from project contingencies and things. I don't think we've been real consistent on how we address that stuff, and so I think that's something to consider next month. I unfortunately will not be here next month, and so I wish everybody luck in coming to the conclusion on how to deal with it. But I think this is very important that we have all this stuff out there.
This might be the time to mention, I was going to mention it later in my report, but we're going to have a special meeting because of the timing with the bid on the park. So we'll need to compare our calendars, but you may be able to attend that. It'll be the week of the 8th, probably 10th, 11th, 12th, somewhere of May.
We're thinking about having a special meeting of this group, and I guess the park subcommittee as well, when the bids are opened, and they're going to be open on the 9th. So we're going to get within a 30-day time frame for accepting the bid or not. It may require some special attention of both the subcommittee and this group. And so David and staff will let you know when that's arranged. Any other?
The bids on the 9th.
Yes.
Right.
All right, any other, you had a question, Bob?
I did, just in sort of two related questions, given the fact that our wish list or these additional considerations are pretty significant. Is there any opportunity as we reach the end of the year and the end of our scheduled tax collection to consider an extension of the tax? And if so, does that originate with this body, or is that strictly the city council that would deal with that? I know MAPS 4 is, potentially on the table. There's discussion of that, and I would imagine there would be serious resistance to extending the tax, but maybe that's the elephant in the room. Do we talk about it now? Is that a possibility at all, or do we not consider that as an even remote possibility?
I think the discussion has been so far that they would like to continue the tax, but it's planned for other things and not a continuation of this program. Since we do have excess funds, we have a good problem here.
But Bob, that's not to say that we couldn't, if we look at all these and can't solve all the problems, then, I wouldn't want to discourage you from saying that's something we could ask about. It has not been considered because of the reasons David's already alluded to. But as we go forward, there's no reason we can't consider it if this group thinks that we should. So,
well, as I recall, it was done with the ballpark in MAPS 1 that it wasn't a pleasant decision to be made, but it was made, and because it was necessary. I'm not by any means proposing that be done in this case. I just wanted to know if it was a possibility if we wanted to consider it later on.
I think that might be more of a consideration if we were coming up drastically short, but we've got excess funds. I just don't see that happening, personally.
I understand political.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the mayor has already announced some ideas about it. All right. Okay. Any other questions for Mike? Or
I want to thank you. I know it's late. I want to thank you for your patience. This is really an important thing, and I appreciate your time. But there's still plenty of time to go across the street and get an Indian taco or strawberries in Newport. So.
Well, I want to also say that I know we've kept you longer than we normally do, so we're going to try to get through the rest of this with dispatch here. Any new business?
No, sir.
All right. Any advisory board subcommittees that want to be heard about something different today? All right, that takes us through item 20. We've got 21. Any of those need special attention, David? We've read them all.
Just B was a decrease of $6,300, so we sent that on to council.
I love decreases. Okay.
Yes, sir.
That brings us then to, David, your report.
We've talked about pretty much everything, I think, today, so I don't think I could add any new information, and then we talked about the potential for the special meetings, so you'll hear from us shortly on that.
All right, that brings us to item 23. Are there any comments by the board or staff? If not, I want to offer the opportunity for citizens who are here. I'm sorry, Sue. Yes.
I just want to really let Mike and Craig know how much I appreciate that report. And as a board, I want us to maybe, as we go forward, to keep in mind what we've done so far is what we've done so far. So I'm not concerned about consistency. I'm concerned about projects and value, and, equals doesn't mean fair. So we just look at what we're doing and the value of what we're doing in each project. We know our own committees and their projects are so important, but I don't think it has to be any kind of consistency. And I'm very proud of where we've used contingency funds already. So, thank you.
Good point. Anybody else? All right, then. We'll ask if there are citizens here who would like to make comments. I see our city manager is here. Any words of wisdom for us, Mr. Couch? No, sir. In that case, we're adjourned.